Thank you, Presiding Officer. Over the last few years, we've seen the former First Minister launch programmes for government boasting of strength, resilience, fairness and green credentials. But we've rarely needed to look much further than the words in their titles to find the deficit between what is promised and what is delivered. The Scottish Government's delivery deficit matters to people living and working in my constituency in the Borders. It matters to people in our small towns, villages and rural communities across Scotland. And they've heard all this before. We could stand here and pick apart the flimsy policies announced in the programme for government today, but I'd prefer to consider how the government intend to back up this with a real plan to deliver on what they promise. I absolutely welcome the First Minister's proposal to deliver more homes in rural areas. We need a solid plan to make rural Scotland a more attractive place to live and work. And I am sure that that is what the First Minister is getting at, although I can't see him at the moment. So he'll be missing my compliments. But we need to know just how it will be delivered. And I'm not convinced by what we've heard today leaves us any the wiser. Farmers will be disappointed that they still have no idea when the new Scottish Agricultural Bill will be making its way through this Parliament, setting out the framework to support our important farming industry. Given the length of time that farmers have had to wait without the ability to plan for the long term, we need to see the delivery of a practical piece of legislation. So get it on the table now, I say. Not this pitiful lack of detail keeping farmers in the dark. I would also add that it's good to hear the First Minister committing to taking action on addressing the crisis in primary care in rural areas, but these plans have been in the pipeline for years with no progress. It's time to stop promising and start delivering. In 2020, we were promised superfast broadband across rural Scotland with the R100 scheme. We're still waiting. Last year, the government promised to improve the resilience of our ferry network. Now our island communities face more disruption than ever, and the SNP ferry fiasco continues to grow arms and legs. In one of the SNP's first ever programmes for government, it was announced that the A9 would be fully dualled by 2025. We are nowhere near that, and people's lives continue to be lost on that road. The pattern of failure is not unique to rural Scotland, but it is symptomatic of the SNP Green coalition with a Central Belt agenda, a Central Belt obsession, that so many of the failures have hit rural communities the hardest, and that is hard to take. This government loves to talk about what it wants to do, but rarely discusses how it intends to do it, and when it does, it seems to lead to disaster. It rightly wants to look at protection for our marine environment, yet when it comes to making plans to do so, it completely fails to consider the impact it would have on fishing communities. It had the opportunity to gain cross-party support to improve recycling in Scotland, but instead managed to ostracise almost all of Scottish businesses. It has continually committed to restoring 250,000 hectares of peatland, but in every year since making this commitment, it has failed to get anywhere close to those figures. A common theme in this government's failure to deliver on promises made in recent programmes for government is the involvement of the Green Party. Throughout their catalogue of catastrophes, they have proven themselves wholly unfit to govern. Humza Yousaf has doubled down on his backing for the Butte House Agreement and the Green Party's reckless agenda, supporting plans to ban fishing in almost half of Scottish waters, rejecting calls from farmers to authorise the chemical Asilox to control bracken, putting a block on vital road upgrades and removing the closed season for managing deer. I understand that their continued presence in government provides the SNP with a helpful scapegoat when things go wrong, but I'm afraid that people living and working in rural Scotland, the dangerous influence of the Greens, coupled with the disinterest of rural policies and priorities shown by the First Minister, cannot be tolerated anymore. Presiding Officer, we need a government that delivers on its promises, but we also need a plan to be pragmatic and practical and sensible. We need to see action on Scotland's real priorities For rural Scotland, that means delivering a practical agricultural bill as soon as possible, upgrading our roads to save lives, saving our surgeries, fixing the ferry fiasco and accelerating R100. And none of this should come as a surprise, though. It has been promised before. It is now time for this government, presiding officer, to get on and to deliver for the whole of Scotland.